For Durham, Mayor Yankee will be the new member representing Durham. For Banks, Councilor Peter Edison is the new alternate. And finally, we just introduced quickly Councilor Kim Young will now be the alternate for Mayor Rosner. With that, can go ahead and do roll call, please, Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just doing a quick double check of attendees here. Okay, I think we've got
Everybody's here.
Promoted up. Yeah, so I'll go again in jurisdiction order. So for City of Banks, Mayor Jones.
Here.
Thank you. For City of Beaverton, I saw we had Councilor Hartmeyer-Prigg.
Here.
Thank you. City of Cornelius, Mayor Delane.
Present.
Thank you. Let's see, I think for Durham, I don't think we have Mayor Jenke with us. We'll keep an eye out for him. Forest Grove, do we have Mayor Wenzel? Keep an eye out. City of Hillsborough, Mayor Callaway is present, I know. Eating lunch. City of King City, we don't have designated representatives yet, but in speaking with Michael Weston, the city manager, they're anticipating appointments happening at their council meeting this week. So hopefully for next month's meeting, we'll have attendees back from the city. For North Plains, Mayor Linehan. Thank you. For City of Sherwood, we have Council President Young. Thank you for joining us. City of Tigard, Mayor Liu. There you are, thank you. City of Tualatin, Mayor Bubenik.
Here.
Of course, thank you. City of Wilsonville, Mayor Fitzgerald. I think we're maybe still on the lookout. All right. And for Washington County, Commissioner Fye. Thank you. Okay, for Metro, I saw we have Councilor Rosenthal. Thanks for joining us. For ODOT, we have Stephanie. Thank you for joining us. And for TriMet, John, looks like you're sitting in for us today, John Sarah. Thank you. All right, that concludes the roll call.
All right, thanks, Stephen. That brings us to action items. Item 3A is consideration of the Washington County Coordinating Committee meeting summary minutes for March 18th. Everyone have a chance to review, and do they need any edits? If not, do I have a motion for approval?
So moved. Second.
I have Mayor Jones motioning first, and then Mayor Linehan seconding. Any discussions on those motions? All those in favor say aye, or raise your hand. Aye. Those opposed? Abstentions? Looks like it's unanimous. That brings us to item 3A. We have a TDT request, and Dyami Valentine will introduce this topic and discuss it with us. Welcome, Dyami.
Mayor, we have two TDT related items for your consideration this afternoon. First is a request by the city of Beaverton for $500,000 in TDT funds for their Beaverton Loop projects related to so improvements on preliminary design for Watson Avenue and Hall Boulevard. And county has confirmed that these projects are eligible for TDT expenditures, and the WCCC TAC recommended approval at their April 4th meeting. And city staff are available, I would imagine, to respond to any questions if there are any of the group. Otherwise, we would entertain a motion.
Any questions for Dyami? I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on those motions? All those in favor of approving the TDT request from Beaverton, say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Opposed? Don't see any abstentions. All right, that's unanimous. 3C, Dyami, up again.
Great. Thanks. This is Item for project list amendments to the TDT project list. We have been doing these on a fairly regular annual basis. The project list includes all projects that are eligible for expenditures and credits. So this round, we have 27 proposed amendments that have been brought forward by the cities of Banks, Beaverton, Tigard, and Tualatin. These projects were included in your packet, the edits to the project list. The total project amendments result in about 170 million of additional TDT eligible projects. And the WCCC TAC recommended approval at their April 4th meeting. This would be so that the action would be making a recommendation to the board for their adoption of the project list. And there is one amendment, one minor edit to one of the City of Banks projects that revises the project description as well as eligible portion of the project. So just a minor note that will be reflected in the list that goes before the board. And with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Questions or comments? Motions?
Sure, I move that we approve the Washington County TDT project list update.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the Washington County TDT project list. Any discussions on those motions? All those in favor say aye or raise your hands. Aye. Opposed? Don't see any abstentions. Seeing none. All right, that passes unanimously also. Okay, we're moving along here. Woo, like this. Way ahead of schedule. All
Well,
right.
To that
We're up
point, Chair, I think our next presenter actually is going to need a few more minutes to join
Okay.
us. So I have a suggestion that we might jump back to the bottom of the agenda.
Yep.
Item number 5, the other agency updates. I have a couple of things that I wanted to point out very quickly if I could.
Sure.
Just wanted to remind all of the members that the May meeting is being moved from May 13th to May 20th. We talked about that at the end of last month, just to ensure that we didn't have a conflict with folks traveling to DC for the JPAC trip. And Teresa Gardner has sent out an updated calendar invite, so hopefully you all have that, but just wanted to flag that. And just thinking of a future agenda topic, Jessica and I spoke earlier today, and we thought we might want to make some time on future agendas to talk a little bit about the 2025 legislative package and priorities at the state level. And I know that AOC, it looks like, is doing some outreach to the counties. I'm assuming LOC may be doing the same. So that might be a good opportunity for us to think about, as a group, what are some of the potential priorities here in Washington County and at the state level, of course.
All right.
So watch for that on a future agenda or a couple. And then if I'll turn it back to you, Chair, if you want to address any other topics under the other business topic.
All right. One thing you're noticing is that we've kept the time for the meeting at 2 hours. Recall in the past, we usually did about 90 minutes, but we pushed it up to 2 hours when we're going through the whole MISTIP project. Staff, Mayor Lanahan and I discussed this in our prep meeting. We're still going to leave it at 2 hours, but we'll, release early if we get things done in time. Ideally we'll, still be wrapping up in 90 minutes or so, but in case something came up, when the 2025 legislature starts getting a little bit closer, we might need that time again. So we're going to keep at 2 hours, but release early so people can go out and enjoy the rest of the day. Mayor Lube, if you're available, is there anything going on with Region 1 Act?
Yep, thank you. As the vice chair, I attended a meeting with the chairs and vice chairs and members of the Oregon Transportation Commission and the ODOT director and various ODOT staff members. It was an interesting conversation that included just some updates, legislative updates and funding needs. I think that a huge focus was on the transportation funding needs specifically for ODOT. And they have a very robust presentation. They have a 5-minute video sort of to explain to our community members why they're in the position that they're in. They do acknowledge that they're literally really just vocalizing their transportation needs while understanding counties and cities also have needs that they are not addressing. So I think the expectation is that counties and cities are being vocal about what our transportation funding challenges are. And really working on Oregon Highway Plan update, we sort of had small table conversations, which really came about safety and prioritization of road maintenance. And if you take care of safety, it sort of takes care of a lot of the other pieces and goals. So it was a robust conversation with the chairs and vice chairs that were there. So that was my update.
Appreciate it. Nice. Thank you. I see Mayor Wenzel's here now. Turned her back to us. Welcome, Mayor Wenzel. And it looks like Chris is here now. So Chris, we'll flip back over to 4A and welcome Chris to discuss STIF.
Well, actually, the STIF is
The STIF, I'm sorry.
I
All these
know.
acronyms. Yep.
Why they have essentially the same name is one of those mysteries of life. I'm not gonna editorialize about it, but you all can. Hey, it's so nice to see you all. Sorry to be just a tiny bit late. I'm the Policy and Development Manager for ODOT Region 1, so I report to Ryan. I deal with planning and money stuff, and so I've got an overview of the 2027 to 2030 STIP. I know we're talking about the year 2030, which seems amazing, but in transportation time, that will be here really soon. So I have a presentation. I can share my screen, or I don't know if somebody's going to share it. I'm not sure. Let me know which one it is.
Yeah, you go ahead, Chris.
Okay. All right. It'll take me a moment to make sure I'm sharing the correct screen. All right. Oh, I have to hit the share button. That helps out. Can you all see the presentation? This is just the one I had in file, so it says has the TAC on here, but it's exactly the same presentation. So I gave this to the WCCC TAC a couple weeks ago. This is, none of this on here should be breaking news, although it's always good to make sure that we're working on the same set of information. This is versions of presentations that I gave to TPAC and others back in both November as well as February. Mayor Loop highlighted some of the conversations that are coming up, and it looks like that is something that we'll end up having some conversations about in this venue over the summer. So I'll coordinate with Stephen and Jessica on that. So I'll try to run through this quickly so there's time for discussion, questions, presentation. So the STIP, Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. I think if you ask most people, they would get 3 out of the 4 words right, which one to be determined. That's officially what it is. Every state has one. And you've probably also heard of the MTIP, the Metropolitan TIP. That is a subcomponent of this. They have to be one and the same. And so that applies within the metro area. Because if you're like, why do I keep hearing the word TIP? But this is about the overall STIP. It has a lot of things in it. Basically, most of the federal transportation money, as well as state funds that go towards those things. It doesn't have everything. Snow plows, everyday operations and maintenance, not in there. The highway fund money that goes to cities and counties isn't in there. STIF and CO's Connect Oregon is not in there, but a lot of the funds are programmed in it. And one thing that I've come to learn about the STIP is it's kind of 2 things. There's the process of planning for it and determining what is in it. It's kind of STIP programming. And then what it really exists is as like a plan and like an overall like transportation funding document. And it's sort of like a set of accountability and accounting. And so it is all of those things, but it's really kind of reporting out the use of funds. And projects and programs have scopes and anticipated budgets and schedules, and those get adjusted over time. And that's really what the STIP is. It's a big book. The way that the Oregon Transportation Commission has handled it historically is it puts the funds into a set of categories. You could say they're silos, you could say they're broad. Some of these are different than others. Fix-It actually is the big one. It has a collection of a lot of things in it. Pavement, bridges, culverts, and operations are also the things that are within Fix-It. Safety are things like the arts program and some other allocations. And then a lot of these don't even really go to ODOT. They maybe go to other functions that are part of planning. A bigger piece recently has been ADA curb ramp delivery program. And so these are all the different categories that are within the STIP, and traditionally the OTC kind of sets those categories and the details get worked out more. And so the overall timeline for the 2027 to 2030 STIP was throughout like the summer and the fall of 2023, there were discussions, ACT meetings, OTC meetings, other venues, and the funding allocation was approved in November. And what's next is to identify potential projects to program into that. To use FHWA and state program funds. And then ultimately it's summer of 2026 in which the OTC will approve the STIP. But the reason is, just to be clear, it's the federal fiscal year 27 to 30. And so this one will really take effect starting October 1st, 2026. So just to be clear what years mean, and as you may have noticed, the current STIP is 24 to 27. This STIP is 27 to 30. There's always an overlap year. So you can have things show up in that overlap year through one or the other STIP. We work it out. It's really about getting things delivered. There were some interesting constraints on the 2730 STIP. Construction costs have gone up for everybody. Most of you are project delivery agencies in some way. You're very familiar with this, asphalt people. IIJA/BIL was the big Surface Transportation Act reauthorization. It expires in 2026. Nobody knows what will happen next. Depends on Congress, the president, but our anticipation is that federal tax revenues don't lend themselves to a boost over that and more of a return to historic spending levels. State highway fund revenues, I mean, they're not tanking, they're just flat, which is an issue when you have inflation. And so those are not going up. We've needed some of these funds to cover operations and maintenance when possible. Those are only state highway funds. You can't use federal funds for that. And then the ADA commitment is an awful lot of money. All of those curb ramps have to be at ADA standards by 2032, and that's a substantial commitment. So all of these are things that affected the allocations of funds. There are those other issues around, there's specific categories that STIP funding has to go into. The ADA investments are legally required. Also, I think the right thing to do. So I think that's two important components. And then trying to figure out really the amount of funding and what you can do with it. So the public feedback, this is at large throughout kind of the overall summer, like road show in the fall and hearing at OTC meetings and comments submitted through ACTS. Fix-It investments are very popular, making sure that the existing system works. I mean, yeah, like culverts are not very exciting until they fail. We're not trying to get exciting. And so making sure that everything continues to work, very popular. Public and active transportation investments are popular, especially in urban areas. The Great Streets approach to having fewer silos and looking at unique issues kind of through a multiple funding approach, that people liked that at large. Safety, comprehensive safety improvements, climate, environmental projects are popular without a lot of details on what those are, and a lot of interest in what you could call fairness, you can put it in quotes, but what is a fair distribution? No one has an answer to that, but there's a lot of concern about making sure urban, rural areas, different parts of the state, that there's some level of, well, let's balance conceptual priorities with also making sure that everybody gets taken care of to the degree possible. And so these numbers are, really large. I mean, I can't give you a concept for what $640 million is, build a Beaverton library with dollar bills. I don't know, it's a lot of money, but as you see, it's a lot less money than has been in past years. Fix-It funding is experiencing a 40% decline from the two prior STIPs. And in fact, if you compare the 21-24 STIP to the current 24-27 STIP, you see some real differences in there. ADA funding has really ramped up. Safety funding is about the same. Enhanced money is at nothing. And that went from over $700 million, a lot of that was HB 2017 funds, down to 200 million, still a lot of HB 2017 funds down to zero. And so that is a real big difference. And the way that the OTC and the ODOT staff really built this up is they said, well, for each of these categories, here's a rough estimate of what it would take to meet all of the pre-existing agreements, state and federal requirements, almost what's the minimum amount of money roughly that we think that you would need in each of these categories in order to do the things you have to do. Like you need to keep interstates paved at a certain quality level or you get, penalized by FHWA. And at the end of the day, what they came up with is a number that was actually just a little bit below the total amount of funds available. And so there was about $70 million across the 3 to 4 years where it was not allocated. But everything else, zeroing out some things like Enhance is not a required program. And so that received zero and so did some others. And that's how you ended up with the amount of STIP funds. And you see the overall amount of STIP is itself quite a bit less. Yes, a lot of it's going to ADA, but we just think there's going to be less funding available overall. So what does that mean? And this seems to be the most, I don't want to call it the popular slide, but the one where people are like, oh, okay, this is useful. Some of you have heard me say this before. I think here, there's no plan to pave anything other than interstates and only to the degree required from 2027 on. Now, is the future as we see it today going to be the future? We hope not, but as of today, that would be the case. We're just load rated. We won't be able to address biking and walking gaps, which is one of the priorities in the Oregon Transportation Plan recently updated. So we're not actually able to pursue some of our own priorities. Yeah, we got to really think about asset maintenance or not, and we're going to be more reactive overall. So, these things will have just a cascading set of effects. I would say it's clearly not our dream step and probably not your dream step either. So what exactly is next? Well, the new Oregon Transportation Plan establishes climate safety and equity as really important lenses. They are the features of the key performance indicators that the agency is trying to achieve by 2050. And some of those are still to be determined, but trying to figure out exactly how to measure these to have investments that advance these concepts and specific indicators is one of the next steps. What I can tell you is we haven't really started with any kind of scoping yet. The arts program, I know that local agencies, including probably many of yours, have already put in applications. So that one kind of works in its own time frame. But everything else, I think we're still thinking about how to think about what investments we will make. And there's a lot of concepts still undergoing discussion. That $70 million that was unallocated, the OTC, with some help from the ODOT staff, talked about creating a Great Streets 2.0. It's a little bit of Great Streets 1.0 and a little bit of old leverage programs. And so the idea being that when ODOT is already planning to be in a location because of ADA ramps or for an arts project, knowing that the arts projects themselves are still to be determined, could we build that out and leverage that mobilization and effort in order to do more things that are not restricted to just like a fix-it category or a public and active transportation category or safety category, and to have these sort of multifaceted investments where there's a lot of different things going on at once in a location. And so this is something that we're taking a look at now about how exactly that could work and where those locations could be. That is $70 million for the entire state over 4 fiscal years. So that is not necessarily a lot of money for any one individual location. So that is kind of a reality, but this is a chance to do things that are a little bit different. Some of these principles, where can we find priorities that overlap across these different program areas? We do want to advance safety, equity, and or climate, probably as many of those as possible, but certainly one of those. The hope is for this to be in urban as well as rural areas. And ultimately to just try to get multiple needs at once. I mean, an example is one of the projects being funded in Great Streets 1.0 is at the Lombard and Denver intersection in North Portland. And that's a complicated area and it needs operations upgrades, it needs safety upgrades, it needs paving. Those typically would have to come from 3 different, categories or silos of funding. And the secretary would say is, well, we've got all these needs combined right here. So let's not worry about what category they're in. So that's an example. It's not the only example, but that's an example of the kind of investments that are being looked at where there's lots of different concepts coming together. The last slide I have is not part of the overall STIP presentation, but it's a good reminder about funding opportunities coming up. We try to run as many, grant programs and other investment opportunities that go just beyond the program STIP. And so Oregon Community CAPAS, I think a lot of the funding for this comes from HB 2017. This is an increasingly popular program. Just want to highlight that pre-applications will be in the late summer and the fall. It's a longer process than some of the other grant programs. Ultimately, money won't be allocated out for like 13 months from now. But just want to put that on everybody's radar as something to consider. And this is primarily for active transportation that is off of a roadway, right? So this is good opportunities for trails that help connect people to get to places, that it's not just a sidewalk or a bike path on a roadway, but instead like a more important part of the active transportation system. So I just want to flag that, and that is the end of my show. So I don't know if there's any comments or questions you all want to have. I will unshare for now, and I can bring up slides again.
We have one hand up already, Chris, Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, I'll go back to that one table that you had.
Yeah.
The overall TIP monies have declined, but the other category, what is included in the other? That's grown from, say, 180,000 to 180 million to 300 million. So its percentage has increased rather dramatically. I'm just curious what's included in that. And then do you have any ideas on what major equity projects or what is the major equity focus?
Well, that first question, I wish I knew the answer to, and I don't, and I'll have to take a look. I do know of one thing that's in that, which is when the legislature worked to transfer 82nd Avenue over to the city of Portland, not all of it, but most of it, they said, dear ODOT, please contribute $70 million. And we did not have $70 million cash sitting around. And so that was spread out in a funding plan over a number of years. And I think we worked with the city on that because they got ARPA funding that had to be spent pretty quickly from the legislature. And so what would be the right amount of money at the right amount of time? And I think that one of the things in that, but not all of it, is the remainder of the money that ODOT owes the city on that transfer. So that's an example of the kind of things that are in that category. I'll have to look it up and get back to you. That's not my world. In terms of the other question around equity, I don't know. I think there's kind of a conversation now, like what are the kinds of projects that advance equity? And so this isn't an answer about ODOT, but I know like in the Metro RTP, how can you come up with something which is quantitative or measurable in some way? And I know that one of the categories that like the RTP considered was a project located in a underserved area or an equity focus area. Now, I would say that doesn't in and of itself mean a project is equitable. Depends on what that project does in that area. But I think some of the concepts are, is something community supported? Is this something that improves access? And so I don't know if there's a way to easily check off boxes. Some of these things might ultimately have qualitative answers. And I think trying to figure out a way that we can measure progress, but also do work that truly helps out people. We're still having a conversation about what that means and how to measure that.
Thank you.
So Chris, on that slide about when you mentioned about bridges will be load rated, what does that mean?
So someone else here probably has a better answer to that, but my understanding is that's where you put up a sign and says, well, if your truck's over this weight, please do not use this bridge because this bridge may have a bad day then. And so my words, not the words of the sign. And so
basically it's bridges there's going to be no enhancements, no capacity building, whatever you want to call it, a bridge, basically no dollars put into it. We're just going to say, hey, this is as much as this bridge can bear, and that's it.
Well, I mean, I think that's a short-term answer. That's not going to work in the long term.
Right.
you know, and that becomes actually a really, I don't want to take us down too much of a side path, you know, it becomes an interesting thing around things like emissions. It's really interesting to sometimes read things from ODOT Region 5, a world far away from all of us in Eastern Oregon. And they've done a lot of work trying to reduce like freight barriers, such as low bridges or bridges that, you know, are having bad days, so that trucks don't have to go take a 3-hour detour, because they're like, that's a lot of diesel.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how these things start to interact with one another. You want trucks to take a direct route because then they're more, you know, they spend less fuel, and that's good for emissions. And so, yes, that's bad for the bridge, and it's bad for freight, but it starts to, you know, create issues around like climate. And so it's just something to, all these things are interconnected. So.
Yeah, I saw Stephen's hand went up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just gonna, I think Chris touched on a couple of things I was gonna say. So as a system operator, we find ourselves having to load rate bridges periodically. And so, as he was saying, that starts to impact freight movement and emissions, right? By directing large trucks potentially out of direction, you may have impacts, what might be considered an equity impact. You may end up diverting trucks into places where you'd rather they not go, because of those diversions as well. And so I think there are a variety of really important reasons why it's essential that we take care of our bridges. And I would say also emergency impacts. So emergency service responders, fire trucks are extremely heavy. So we also have, in some cases, impacts to some of those emergency response type vehicles as well.
Right. And is this state-owned? Well, how do I put this? These state bridges, or these bridges across interstates, Chris?
Well, there'll be other state-owned bridges. Bridges are like their own special category that are, I wish I had better answers, but I know that, I mean, this could end up affecting local bridges. We have a local bridge program as well as the state-owned bridge program. And I mean, the answer is just less money for both. And so, you know, that's always a challenge. Is I think we all like bridges that work. And so that's definitely an effect on the state system, but it's not going to help out locals either, for sure.
So I'm sorry, I'm harping on this. So bridges that cross like interstates, like I-5, 205, stuff like that, are those funded with federal dollars on day-to-day, or is it state dollars, or a combination of both?
I mean, it's mostly federal dollars. Remember, I mean, you need to have a certain amount of state dollars kind of as match in order to get the federal dollars. And I think ultimately an important thing is interstates have a whole different set of requirements. Like they're very much federal roads, and we're in charge of the care and feeding of the interstates. So if you were to be like, what interstates have bad paving situations? The answer is not too many, because FHWA cares a lot about that. I think where you're going to mostly see that is on US highways or state highways is where you're more
like your rural bridges and stuff.
Yeah, more likely. I mean, but it could be, you know, bridges are expensive. You got to paint them, you got to pave them, you got to do a lot of things with them. And so, I mean, I don't think anyone needs to worry about a specific dangerous situation. I think a lot of things to be taken care of before that, but it's just that they may become inconvenient, especially if we just have less money overall. I think with the current levels of funding, which I hope are not the future levels of funding, I saw something that said you're supposed to have a bridge replacement program that is about a 100-year cycle. You know, bridges tend to live about that long, and there's things you do to prolong their life. I think our current cycle with the current level of funding is a 900-year replacement cycle, which is, you know, not suboptimal.
Yeah. My last question, now getting off of bridges, is when Congress is playing games with budgets and they're delayed on passing, you know, how does that affect your planning in the dollars? Is your dollars caught up in the budget fiasco in DC when they can't even approve a budget?
So, this is not my area of specialty, but here's what I've come to understand. So, FHWA dollars that come through something like STIPs, and this would be the case, I think, for all the states, they're formula. They just kind of roll in, and they're set a long time ago, and they're not part of those budget authorizations. There's not a sudden like, oh, wow, you know, the bank account's empty.
Right.
Like those conversations are about specific things. I think where they become challenges are, I think with IIJA, that got held up for a while. And when there's those, I don't know what the frequency of those are, every 5 years, 8 years, when there's a surface bill authorization, surface transportation bill authorizations, those are big deals. And when those get held up, then those can create uncertainty about money, amounts of money, grant programs that tend to be more regular, as well as new policies. I mean, there's often new ideas, things that people have advocated for and are excited about, and those get held up. So I think that's what affects us. I think whether or not Congress is going to, federal workers are going to get paid. I mean, it's a little bit hard to get the money obligated if the federal workers aren't there to obligate the money. But I think in terms of like, is the money available? That doesn't tend to be a problem.
Okay.
Hope that helps.
All right, thanks. Any other questions for Chris?
I will work to get an answer on the other, and I will zip it over to Stephen and Jessica. Thanks, Councilor Rosenthal, for asking that.
All right. Well, thanks for visiting us today, Chris.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right. That brings us to 4B, the Westside Multimodal Improvement Study update. This will be led by Stephanie Millar with ODOT's Urban Mobility Office. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi there, nice to see everyone. I was here with you almost exactly a year ago telling you about this project earlier on with my co-project manager, Kate Hawkins. Here we go. I'll start with some background and context. Some businesses on the west side sent a letter to the governor several years ago to ask the traffic delay and travel time reliability in the US 26 corridor be looked at. And so in 2019, the governor's office asked ODOT to study the needs and conditions on Sunset Highway and evaluate what actions ODOT and its regional partners could take to build a multimodal system that supports all who rely on it. The study centers on US 26 from the Vista Ridge Tunnel out to Hillsborough, but the investments considered include investments, projects, and programs, both within the boundary that you see in this picture and beyond that. So the study kicked off in 2022, and we are nearing completion. This is a list of the project partners that participated in the steering committee. We tried to make sure we got everybody that had owned a piece of transportation infrastructure in that study area, and also get some perspective from community-based organizations and area businesses. These are the issues and needs that were identified within the study area, and these build on existing reports and planning efforts and were refined with input from the project management group, which consists of technical staff from local jurisdictions, many of whom I see in the meeting today, either as panelists or participants. And as you can see, the issues and needs identified include things like transit travel times are not competitive with driving alone. The last mile connections are inadequate to get from a transit stop to your final destination. Safety is always a consideration. Congestion due to limited capacity and impaired freight mobility. Okay. So what we did is we took in all the information that we gathered, and I talked about some of that last year, but I can talk about it again during questions if some stuff comes up for you. And we categorized the investments and interventions in kind of a hierarchy of improvement. And this hierarchy is consistent with the way both the metro region and the state look at how to prioritize investments. So first you start with system management, or the things that we can do around the edges that would improve the situation without taking a shovel. Relatively short-term improvements, so a little bit more intensive, but still kind of manageable level. Then looking at enhancing existing infrastructure, and then finally, after you've checked to see if any of those will address the problem, you can look at new infrastructure improvements, so new construction. We had started with those 4, and the committee asked us to also look at tolling. And so I will get into those in just a moment here. So we started with the 2045 Regional Transportation Plan as a base. And this assumes that between today and the end of the study period, 2045, we're expected to see about a 30% population growth and a 37% growth in jobs. This also assumes that the $68.5 billion worth of investments in that RTP have been carried out. So down in the lower left-hand corner, or lower right-hand corner, excuse me, you can see that between today and 2045, we can expect an increase in travel time in this corridor of between 8 and 14%, depending on time of day and direction. So in scenario 1, we applied additional investments to enhance the existing system. So more transit to improve travel time and coverage. And what we see in these actions is that while they're still valuable, they didn't show big improvements in travel time that we were hoping to see. So again, in the lower right-hand box, you can see we only gained about 1% of that time back. So not a big improvement, but we did gain a lot of new transit users with those investments. In scenario 2, we added on top of the assumptions made in the first scenario some near-term and spot fixes. So things like auxiliary lanes at a couple of locations, some minor modifications to the I-405 Vista Ridge Tunnel confluence, and some additional high-capacity transit. Similar to scenario 1, we didn't see big improvements. This got us to about 2% closer to today from future years. In scenario 3, we added to the investments made in 1 and 2. These are all cumulative, building on each other, and looked at some larger facility investments. So this included widening Cornelius Pass Road from north of US 26 to Highway 30, widening Barnes Road to the county line, and some new overcrossings on US 26 to improve surface street connections. We also modeled what would happen if we dedicated an existing lane on US 26 for the exclusive use of freight and carpool vehicles. This turned out to create some noise in the model and gave us some information that headed us in the wrong direction. So for number 4, we dropped that out to get rid of the noise. So in scenario 4, we looked at capital construction projects, and we again layered those on top of 1, 2, and 3 and the base year, with the exception of that managed lane that we pulled out from number 3. So this included modeling the Northern Connector and the North Willamette Bridge, both of which were something that came out of the Washington County Futures Study a few years ago. It also included the redesign of US 26 and I-405 to address bottlenecks, putting the MAX in a tunnel under downtown to improve transit travel time speeds. These all got us some good improvements in travel time. Mobility and reliability are improved, especially for US 26 eastbound. So let's see. Okay. Sorry, I've given this so many times I ought to be able to do it in my sleep. Okay. Finally, we separately looked at what tolling would do on this facility. So we did not look at this cumulatively. We took 1 through 4 out and looked at this independently. So what would happen if we applied a toll to US 26 and 217? All vehicles accessing US 26 between Brookwood and Vista Ridge Tunnel and anywhere along 217 would see a base toll. And in the model, we saw that this didn't quite get us where we wanted to go. So we then applied an additional toll at high traffic points to keep traffic moving. And these are denoted on the map above with stars, just outside the Vista Ridge Tunnel and Cedar Hills Boulevard, Murray Boulevard. So those are the kinds of tolls that that happen at a peak hour to try and help spread the time that people are choosing to travel, or to get them to choose another mode or route. With this one, we saw very significant improvements in travel time and got us not only back to where we are today, but improved it further beyond that. So the steering committee looked at all of this information and first developed a consensus to advance the multimodal investments such as transportation demand management and transit supportive strategies and projects. So those are the things that you really saw in 1 and 2 especially. They had a consensus to study strategic capital investments and funding by looking at tolling paired with complementary investments. So kind of taking number 3 and number 5 and blending them together to look at both a funding strategy and physical solutions at once. They did not reach consensus on furthering the Northern Connector and North Willamette Bridge. Those were the big new capital projects that were proposed. So right now, the recommendations are being circulated among the steering committee members, and for review and confirmation. We have confirmation from almost everyone, but a few are awaiting presentations to their city councils before they're finalized. And the final report is expected in the late spring. Questions?
Questions for Stephanie? Give folks a moment to get back up. Councilor Rosenthal.
Yeah, 2 questions, Stephanie. One is you said the consensus was to do a combined one, and it was alternative 3 and 5, but the 2 biggest improvements were alternative 4 and 5. I'm just curious why 3 was chosen as opposed to 4. And then you mentioned tolling on 217, but I couldn't read your map. Was there a location for a tolling structure or whatever on 217 that I couldn't read?
So this was a modeling exercise just to see what would happen if we did any of the things in this study. So the tolls were applied on 217 as just a base toll. So at any entry point. So but it was just an exercise to see what would happen.
Oh, okay.
And the tolls on 26 appeared to make more difference than the 217 tolls. And your other question was about why 3 and 5 were chosen to move forward in future studies. This certainly doesn't mean that we're rolling out tolls on US 26 or have improvement projects planned. As you just heard from Chris, the financial situation is not conducive to new construction at the moment. So while the improvements that we saw in 4 were sizable, they involved new construction and a lot of political, financial, and environmental risk. And so the committee wanted to go with things that were
more
a little
likely,
bit more manageable.
yeah. That didn't have the headwinds against them. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure, but it would be possible to run a model of that and reevaluate all basically 5 with 3 or 5 with 4. It would be possible to do that, I assume, with the data that we have.
We did model the Northern Connector as a tolled facility because that's what it's proposed as in the Washington County Future Study. I think we only estimated about $4.50 a trip there. I'd have to get back to you on exactly what we saw, but it was not, when looking at the cost benefit, the $450 was not going to pay for the facility.
No, probably not. Okay, thanks.
Other questions for Stephanie? Got a quiet bunch here today. Councilor Hartmeyer Prigg.
Thank you. Yeah, I do have a question, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Stephanie. I'm curious, and being that I'm Mayor Beatty's proxy, you know, I'm not as well versed on these topics. So if I'm the only one that doesn't know this, I can get an answer offline. But I'm curious, like, with the kind of greater Oregon conversation around tolling and the lack of appetite for tolling, would that influence our decision here too? Like, does it cut us off from those possibilities?
I believe that the recommendations that have come out of this study will influence the conversation happening in terms of what legislative packages might look like. So I think the departure here from previous conversations about tolling is a clear connection between what you're being told for and what you're getting, so that it's more evident to people.
Thank you.
No questions.
So also just next steps for this is would be follow-on studies that got into more detail about how these recommendations would work in the future. And currently there is no budget for doing that kind of a study. So we'll see what comes out of the legislative package and if we are directed to do more in the near term.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
All right. That brings us to 4C, the JPAC agenda review, Mayor Callaway and Commissioner Fye.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we have a presentation just on the Unified Planning Work Program, which is something that, you know, we get periodically. Nothing new, just update on that. Let's see, with our regional flexible funds allocation, our step one bonds are retiring so that there's some different, and now there's some different bonding scenarios, you know, that will be under consideration. We'll be talking about the JPAC trip, you know, which will be coming up a little bit later this month. And then also there is a regional transportation priorities funding, I guess presentation, I'll call it, made by AOC and LOC, and which I'm really pleased for. It'll be good to hear from the counties and the League of Oregon Cities. It'll be good to get that perspective very clearly stated at JPAC as well.
Okay. All right.
Does anybody have any questions for Commissioner Fye?
Nice try.
All right, thanks. MPAC agenda, Mayor Rosen's not here. Council President Young, did he give you anything to pass on?
Since he just gave me a couple-hour warning to attend this meeting, he did not pass along any information.
All right. So we already covered item number 5, so open to the floor. Any city updates anybody would like to pass on?
I will just mention that Wilsonville State of the City address is this evening.
Mm-hmm.
Since Mayor Fitzgerald isn't here, I'll plug that for her.
I was gonna say, and Mayor, Council President Young, because I'm so used to calling her Kim. Council President Young. I think you have State of the City this week too, don't you?
Yes, Wednesday, State of the City at 5 is opening with some appetizers and a no host bar, and then 6 o'clock to 7, the event at the Sherwood Center for the Arts.
Okay. Council Rosedal, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to mention the Sherwood State of the City, but that was already covered.
All right. Mayor Wenzel.
I'm going to jump in and say that Forest Grove State of the City is Monday, April 22nd at noon at the community auditorium. I also just want to say a big thanks to Washington County. Our Misstep project on Thatcher Road is completed with the Beacon pedestrian crossing. We have about 2,000 students at our high school. So we already see that working. It's slowing traffic down. And then I think the that our other big misstep project on Martin Road, the roundabout, is almost complete after a lot of delay. So I just want to say thank you to the county for that and to this group.
Steven.
Oh, I was just gonna say, the Thatcher project, I don't think we have any MSTIP funds in that one. I think we've cobbled together some other funding sources in a partnership with you guys to make that one happen, but I'm excited about that project as well. So, and appreciate that. That's been a really good collaboration. And then, yes, the Martin Road roundabout is open, and I think we're actually planning a ribbon cutting in May. Yeah, so thank you.
Other folks. In the spirit of the State of the Cities, May 2nd is Tualatin's State of the City, 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. at the the Marquee Community Center. It's a free breakfast burrito. So come on and hear what's happened lately in the last year in Tualatin, what we're going to be doing in the next year. Mayor Jones, your turn.
I also have a State of the City on May 2nd, but I only serve dessert and it's at 1 p.m.
All right.
So
Get a full meal day on the May 2nd. I know Mayor Loub's got hers coming up too.
Yeah, I was just gonna say Monday, May 13th at Broadway Rose in the evening, we will have tasty food.
I can't make it. I'll be in DC with Mayor Callaway, I believe.
Well, I'm just gonna say that Mayor Dunham and I, we already did ours, but we'll be glad to send you the YouTube links or the link to TVC TV so that you don't feel left out.
All right. Anything else?
I didn't hear if Mayor Wenzel mentioned we're next Monday, a week from today.
Yep, she did.
I spaced it out. I must have been looking at an email. Sorry.
I don't take offense to the fact that Mayor Delane doesn't listen to me.
I'm sorry. What'd you say?
All right. Steven, you got your hand up again, or?
I do. I just wanted to give a quick heads up. I got an email from Mark Ottenod with the city of Wilsonville. It sounds like I think the mayor's or the state of the city may be delayed until May 6th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me just if
Glad Mark said something because I had it on my calendar too for tonight too with Mayor Callaway.
Yeah, so Mark, I've just given you permission to talk. Do you want to confirm that? Make sure I didn't miscommunicate.
Yes, you were correct, Stefan. Mark Ottened, City of Wilsonville. Mayor Fitzgerald's State of the City has been delayed until Monday, May 6th. We have a DRB appeal on a land use matter tonight before the City Council, and therefore I thought it was better to postpone her State of the City. Thank you.
Mark, is it still at City Hall?
Correct. May 6th at City Hall at 7 p.m. Monday,
Okay.
May 6th.
Thanks. You saved Callaway a trip across the county.
Just in the nick of time.
Yeah. Anything else? All right, so we got done a little early today. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Mayor Wenzel just did the fist pump so she
Yeah.
can do it.
I'm excited. I move that we adjourn the meeting early. Thank you.
Second to Mayor Wenzel's primary.
He's actually listening to that. All right, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Have a terrific day. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks all.